right, welcome FJ readers and watchers and listeners. My name is Trevor Johnson, and I am the editorial fellow at Friends Journal. I'm here with Sarah Klatt Dickerson, who is saying hello from Portland, Oregon today. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Sarah is the Portland coordinator for Quaker Voluntary Service. She's also an artist and poet and an amateur gardener, as we'll talk about later. And she has been involved in the Quaker community in the Northwest for 8 years now. She is the author of Spiritual Nurture in a Fix-It Culture. And that appears in our April issue of Spiritual Nurture and Quaker Training. In this article, Sarah talks about learning how to listen deeply and how that took working against her natural tendencies to want to fix things. So, and before we jump in, I want to be upfront with my bias in this conversation. I am currently a QVS alumni fellow at Friends Journal, which means I have completed a year of service of the program and have come back for another. So that's my bias. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us this morning. I'm so glad to talk to you.
Yeah, great to be here.
Wonderful. So I guess we'll just jump right in. You begin your piece talking about your parents, both pastors, and trying to emulate them by also doing this practice of deep listening. You ended up going to seminary as well, and I was wondering what that decision to go to seminary was like for you. Like, what influenced that?
Yeah, it's actually kind of a funny story. I ended up going to seminary with both my parents at the same time. And we had classes together, and we lived together for a little while of that. And we would drive the hour and a half from the beach to our classes, have classes all day, and drive back. So the decision to go to seminary, my dad was already in seminary at the time, for the second time through, just as its own story. But I was just feeling like this call to do some kind of ministry and wasn't sure exactly what that was going to look like. But it seemed like a natural path. And I met some Quakers in Newburgh who were like, hey, I'll help you get a Friends scholarship to go to seminary. And I was like, well, that would be great. So that was very helpful. But yeah, I just felt this stirring, maybe there's something here that I need to explore and possibly do something with my life. Yeah, and then I applied, got in, and started immediately after I graduated college. So it was a pretty transition. Yeah, and then I went to seminary with my parents.
That I didn't know that. That is quite humorous to think about the whole crew going together. That's great. So when you talk about your experience of deconstructing your faith in seminary, that was something that happened during your time. And did you, just to clarify, did you do all of your seminary at Friends Seminary?
Yeah, at George Fox Seminary.
George Fox Seminary. Oh, wonderful. So when you talked about deconstructing your faith during that time, and that it left you in this desolate place, you mentioned that some of what you were seeing is that all that you considered sacred was tainted by the systems of oppression that run the world. Could you say more on that? Like, what in particular were you seeing?
Yeah, I think I grew up in this, what I now see as a bubble, and in some ways that was really great, and in a lot of ways I was very sheltered and very privileged. And as I began to learn more about racism and the systematic structures of racism and sexism and heteronormativity and homophobia and all of these things, these systematic structures that really I'd only experienced on a interpersonal, small micro level, as I learned about whoa, these structures are affecting this country in the US, and they're affecting a lot of church politics and Christianity. And then I was like, oh no, they're even affecting Quakers. Quakers, the people that I love more than anyone, like these people that I found my home with, that I finally resonated with spiritually. And I begin to see, like, I looked around in meeting one day and was like, wow, almost everyone here is white. What is going on? And I was a part of a yearly meeting that for a while that was not open to queer folks in any way, and like began to be a part of those discussions around sexuality. And I was like, what? Like my queer friends like are kind of welcome, but aren't really welcome in this place. And that was with evangelical friends, and I know that's a big thing that's happening with yearly meetings across lots of places. But I just like was looking around and I was like, who are the people that are here, and like who are the people that are being excluded, whether intentionally or not, by the systems that we have set up? And also thinking about like, how do our structures of like silence and the way we sit work with like folks with different disabilities? And I just noticed like who's not here and why is that the case? And also alongside with that, like just like looking around and realizing, oh my gosh, this is present even here. I was doing a lot of deconstructing around Christianity specifically and the Bible, which I've spent my life studying and reading and loving and then hating and then maybe loving again, but mostly indifferent at the moment. But just recognizing like how patriarchy is like woven into the Bible from the very beginning. And as I started to see these things, and not that there's not beautiful, wonderful things that are a part of the Bible that still like speak to me today, but as I started to like connect the systematic stuff to the things I'd grown up with in my personal experience, I realized, oh, like this affects me. This affects like my community, my meeting that I love. This affects the people around me. And it was a very despairing realization to be like, even this thing that I thought was so beautiful and so pure or whatever and good and right, like even that isn't fully whole. Even that is broken and like is needing fixing, which is kind of funny considering the title of my article. But
yeah.
Even that is needing this like movement towards justice.
Yeah. So, what do you feel is like, since that time when you were feeling such desolation, what has changed since then in how you think about your faith?
Yeah, well, a lot of things. I think probably the biggest thing is I stopped considering myself a Christian, which was a big personal move. Even just like saying it out loud to myself was like, what, can I do that? Like this is, I mean, my parents are pastors. Like this has been a part of my life since before I was born. And that's been like a very healing time for me. It's not something, I'm not against Christianity or Jesus or the Bible. There's still things that like really impact me from my growing up experiences, but it's been a healing time to have space. And I've also moved from like evangelical friends to liberal friends, which has its own set of problems, but and wonderful, quirky folks. That's been good to like have time to heal and have time to just like let it all go for a while and explore like, what does spirituality mean to me if Christianity isn't a part of it? If my understandings of the structures of religion and institutionalized like spirituality aren't a part of my life, like what does it mean to be a spiritual being? Like what is God or spirit or light to me? What does that look like? And it's been such a good healing time and a time of exploration, and it was definitely very hard at the beginning. Like it was hardcore, to put it bluntly. And there was just like a lot of like feelings and like emotions. It's just a lot of anger, like of like, this is the thing that's a part of my life, and now it seems so screwed up, and it's very frustrating. And then moving from that into a place of like that stillness that I talked about in my article, and that stillness led into this place of like joy that came after a while, after a long time of learning my connection with the earth and like how that's spirituality to me, and my connection to people, and this listening is kind of the center of spirituality. So it's been good. It's been a really difficult and beautiful journey.
That's good. That's good. Speaking of your connection to the earth, one of the things that you mentioned in the article that you wrote is that right after this period of desolation, you started gardening because it was the one thing that felt right to do. So what was it about gardening that felt right to you in that moment?
Yeah, I wrote that sort of as like a little tongue-in-cheek, like, well, of course, that's what made sense after going through this huge uprooting of my system and my life. I've reflected a lot on this since then of like, why did I do that? Like, was that the thing that made sense? And in the moment, I could not have told you. I just knew I needed to like be planting things and be gardening and shoveling bark dust and soil and doing that. But as I like reflect back on my life, I think about, along with the thread of spirituality that was very much Christianity and church and singing and praying and the Bible and Jesus that is woven its way through my life, there was also this other thread of spirituality that was very earthy, very natural. And I think about all the places that I've lived, from the mountains to the valleys to the hills to the meadows to the tree fort in my backyard in California and the ocean, living at the coast. And I think about how the land, like the ground, the earth, and those places are so sacred to me. And as I reflect back like on my growing up experience, I think about like those were my teachers, like that meadow and mountains in California and that big hill and field and trees in my backyard in Michigan and the ocean on the coast, on the Oregon coast, and walking with the waves and just like pouring out my heart. And I think like it does make a lot of sense. Like when I tie it all together, when I like drew that thread through my life of this is where I feel alive. This is where I feel connected to all things. And like I can see like in the earth, like in nature, there's this like there's life and death and change and transition and seasons. And I resonate so deeply with that. And yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what spirituality is to me now. And I didn't know it back then when I was like, I just have to go garden. That's all I got to do. That's all I can do right now.
Yeah.
But it just was like another like part of that thread weaving its way through my life.
There's something about that other thread of spirituality that maybe you weren't deconstructing at that time as much and was a way for you to connect in. That's really interesting. So you are the Portland coordinator of Quaker Voluntary Service, and you do mention QVS in the article. So there's a lot of different things that are part of the Quaker Voluntary Service program, and a lot of different work that you do with them. So how do you find QVS as a space to practice deep listening and spiritual nurture?
Oh, it's such, honestly, I love my job. I love my job so much. I'm so glad to be doing work that I feel so strongly about and that is so meaningful and connected. And I evangelize to people all the time. Have you heard about Quaker Voluntary Service? It's so great. And one of the things I think that drew me to QVS at the beginning, before this I was a pastor, and thinking about, I discovered in studying and then being a pastor, like there were things about that really resonated with who I am as a person and who I was becoming in this new listening and space that was growing inside of me. And then there were parts of it that didn't resonate. And as I moved to a different kind of spirituality, that was a big part of it. But when I looked at Quaker Voluntary Service, I was like, I get to journey with these 5 to 7 young adults every year in a really beautiful way. In a very strange and unique way too.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
in what other context would I be a part of like a person's personal life, spiritual life, work life, communal life, living situation, money situation, food? Like, there's just like so much there, and around every corner there's an opportunity for deep listening. I love doing like monthly check-ins one-on-one with folks,
Mm-hmm.
and just like, how are you doing? Like, how's your spirit? Where are you? And checking in about the different aspects of QVS, but also I ask a lot of questions and just provide space for whatever is coming up. And like, whatever comes up, I think it's beautiful and good, and each person has their own unique experience. I also get to listen in a group dynamic with the local
Mm-hmm.
support committee, which I love, being a part of those meetings. And we're doing, the meeting for worship for business of QVS. But there's places to like listen together to see this movement. I love listening with the staff of QVS. Like, a part of our meetings every week is having some silence and then checking in about our lives, and then we talk during the week. And there's just listening is such a huge part of my job. I would say it's the majority of my job, is that like listening, connecting, asking questions, creating space. Like, that's
Yeah.
that's
Mm-hmm.
what I love to do, and struggle to be good at it sometimes, but I really enjoy doing that. Yeah. So it's everywhere. There's the opportunities to listen abound.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can only imagine. Well, actually, I don't have to imagine. I've been through the program, so I understand. So, and part of that deep listening, and you've mentioned this a few times just now, but in the piece you talk about the fact that there's this almost a dichotomy between deep listening and this logical fix-it culture.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the practice of spiritual nurture, as you do it in the different forms throughout your life, do you see a place for both of those in spiritual nurture, and what roles do they take?
Yeah. I'm all about integration and like moving away from like this polarization of like, it's this thing or it's this thing. Like, it's that very like dualistic, like kind of binary thinking. And I find, like I wrote about, like in our culture, there's such an emphasis on the like logic, consumeristic, get it done, be productive, like know where you're going, have those goals, check it off the list. Like, there's so much emphasis on that like productivity,
Mm-hmm.
which is not great for listening most of the time. But I do think like there's helpful pieces in there, like more of like part of my job is kind of like coaching
Mm-hmm.
on adulting, how to adult in the world. That sounds like a weird word, but if you don't know what that means, look up a meme, and hopefully that will be enlightening to you. Um, and maybe that will not, so maybe don't do that. Also, Google can be a scary thing. I'm getting sidetracked. So I think in my job, like, there's ways that I can integrate those parts of me. Like, I love brainstorming. I'm an idea person. I love like trying to think about things in different ways and put myself in people's minds and hearts, and like see how are they perceiving this? How are they doing this? So there's a lot of room for that kind of more systematic part of things, and also um, very practical things. Like, as we're in this season of the QVS year, folks are looking at what's next and what's coming after this. And so in our times together, I'm balancing like encouraging them to be present and asking them those questions of helping them sink into the moment and into the reality of what's going on in their year, but also
Mm-hmm.
talking about, building a resume and writing a cover letter, and very practical, like logic-y, helpful, productive things towards moving on. So it is that like balance, and it's very fluid and dynamic, which I like. It's not like, oh, I've arrived. I have found the balance of all things, logic and listening. No, no, no. That probably will never happen. But I am in that like ebb and
Mm-hmm.
flow of discerning. Uh, is this the time when we need to strategize together? Or is this a time where you're really in your head and thinking a lot, and we need to take a step.
So what was your favorite thing or favorite part of gardening?
My favorite part of gardening. So I did like communal gardening, which is really great, and I would walk there from my house. And my favorite days were the days when it was just like three of us, and we would come to the garden, like from totally different parts of town. We would all walk there, and we'd get there, and we'd be like, I'm so tired. I'm so frustrated. I have all these things going on. And we would just have this like angst built up. And we would sit down around these baby fruit trees and just weed them for hours. And those fruit trees were weeded more than anything else in the garden because like that was like this like place of solace. And we would just talk about our lives and complain and encourage and love on each other, and like just those moments around those fruit trees. They're just like, like tiny fruit trees, like not even growing leaves yet sometimes. But we would just weed the circle around them, and we'd move from tree to tree. And like that time was just sitting in the grass, and my hands in like the dirt, talking to these people that I really care about. It was so healing, and it was so beautiful. Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. Well, good. I hope the fruit trees are doing well.
I hope so too. I haven't seen them in a while, so we'll see.
Yeah, let me know. Well, Sarah, that feels like a nice stopping place. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. It was really great chatting with you. So, readers, watchers, and listeners, that was Sarah Klatt Dickerson talking about her article, Spiritual Nurture in a Fix-It Culture. And you can find that piece in our April 2016 issue, Spiritual Nurture and Quaker Training. And you can find links to Friends Journal, where you can subscribe, and to Quaker Voluntary Service in the video description. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Until next time.